I'm Matt Dixon, and welcome to the Purple Patch Podcast. The mission of Purple Patch is to empower and educate every human being to reach their athletic potential. Through the lens of athletic potential, you reach your human potential. The purpose of this podcast is to help time-starved people everywhere integrate sport into life.
Today's show is brought to you by Inside Tracker. Now, Inside Tracker is a tool that I use, as well as many Purple Patch athletes use, to leverage insights from taking a look inside, assessing biometrics via blood work, to get some really precise focus on where we should put our energy to yield not just sporting results, but also to develop and improve the areas that are going to improve our performance across life, as well as the quality of our life and even longevity over the years ahead. There are many key aspects around all components that yield better performance gain, and the results are trackable. By reassessing, you can actually see some quantifiable insights into whether your energy is yielding a return of investment, and that's what I really love. I should also point out that Inside Tracker has a fantastic app that integrates with tools such as Oura Ring so that you can have a one-stop shop. And I even know that they've got a sneaky app development coming up soon in which it's going to yield and drawing insights on a week-to-week basis on whether the efforts and energy that you put in around what you're eating, how you're sleeping, how you're exercising, aggregate into are you improving your daily performance and your future self, or of your actions yielded a negative impact. Some really powerful stuff, all of it peer-reviewed, some really smart folks involved in the program. And you can get involved too. You don't need to be a Purple Patch athlete. All you need to do is head to insidetracker.com/purplepatch. Use this code PurplePatchPro20. You can get 20% off everything at the store. All right, enjoy today's show. It's a cracker. And welcome to the Purple Patch Podcast. As ever, your host, Matt Dixon. And folks, we've got a cracker this week. It's a pop-up episode. This week, we noticed some really exciting news in the Ironman world, and that's the fact that all Ironman and Ironman 70.3 events that are happening across Europe, including the Vinfast Ironman World Championships in Nice this fall, are all going to be supported by our friends at Precision Hydration. That is a seismic change from having Gatorade being delivered on course and now having access to Precision Hydration. It's wonderful news for our athletes that are racing over there, and I'm sure you might agree as well. So our athletes, since this news broke, have had a ton of questions about some of the hows that this is going to occur, what it means to their fueling and hydration plan. And so I reached out and asked Andy Blow, the founder of Precision Fuel and Hydration, to join me for a discussion. Now, the purpose of today's episode is informational and educational. So this is very important. I wanted to ask Andy, what and how is Precision going to show up on course? What can we expect? Are we going to be delivered tablets or powders or pre-mixed bottles? Are we going to get gels? Are we going to get chews? Other components like that. I also asked Andy to get a little bit deeper, go beyond Precision, and give some of his recommendations on how to develop step by step the optimal fueling and hydration plan now that this is a reality. The episode, it's packed with everything you need to know, and I'm sure it's going to be helpful in your racing. Before we get into the meat and potatoes, why don't we quickly go through Coach's Corner. Yes, folks, Coach's Corner. So we always like to do this now as we've reformatted the show a little bit. I'm going to give you some insights and perspective, and I'm going to try and keep this a little bit shorter. But I do want to give you a glimpse behind the curtain of some of the thinking that we're doing as a coaching team right now around how we're prescribing and building training sessions, as well as some of the supporting education. Now, as you capture it at this show, we're really moving into early season racing. The weather is warming up. We've got a lot of racing ahead of us. We've also got a little bit of fatigue creep coming because we're starting to actually turn up the volume on the training intensity a little bit as well. And so with that in mind, what's in our minds? Well, last week we went through some of the physiological aspects, so how we're actually structuring the training so far as the stimulus side. Next week, I'm going to go into some of the education and how we're supporting athletes in cases or areas around self-management, some of the nutritional aspects and stuff like that. This week, I want to talk a little bit about workout design that goes beyond the physiology. So what we're focusing, because there's a big shift at this time of the season. When we think about this, our emphasis right now and how we build these training sessions has really started to evolve. And there's a few main focus points that we build into almost all of the training sessions. And then in addition to the actual integration into the training, we reinforce this with the discussions on our private community and some of the feedback and questions that we get, as well as obviously in-flight on the live and on-demand video coaching that we do. So that creates the combination where we're really trying to empower athletes, make them smarter, but also develop not just the physiological readiness, but the racecraft to really yield a return on their efforts. So the first thing around the main point around this is race skills. At this time of the year, and we've really started to integrate this over the last 3 to 4 weeks, is actively building skills associating with racing faster into the training sessions. So what does this look like? Well, a lot of the swim workouts right now have got sighting, both in upskilling of really trying to dial in the mechanics, as well as some of the postural readiness to be able to do it consistently. So let's just arbitrarily say, imagine if I said go 10 100s at a threshold effort. We'll now start to integrate where a lot of those hundreds will include sighting in a swimming pool 3 times every lap, developing the skills so it becomes a part of your swim stroke and ensuring there isn't too much of a delta between swim speed with and swim speed without sighting. So that's obviously a hugely valuable component because we understand from last week's episode when we talked about swim speed that we want to have the skill reinforced and we want to be able to swim in a straight line so that we get best speed return. So a lot of the training sessions are integrated into that. Really, really valuable, really important. We also do a little bit of self-awareness with pacing development, not just by using your flashy new goggles with timing, but actually developing the inner animal so that we can get best speed return for a longer distance effort, as well as getting a sense of awareness so that we can have athletes taking out speed without absolutely blowing up. So a lot of components there, and that's just one example. I'll give you one more while I'm here. What about on the bike ride? Well, we've had a lot of focus, but we're building the training sessions right now around 3 core elements. Number one, of course, physiological stimulus. Do we want it to be a threshold workout? Do we want it to be an endurance ride? That, of course, is the baseline, the foundation of it. But in addition, we're integrating 2 other main elements. Number one is terrain management. So really trying to help athletes develop their craft on getting best speed return relative to their efforts. And it's right in the construction of the training session. So we leverage the Velocity platform that simulates outdoor terrain, including how you build into little rampers and rollers coming up hills and how you crest over the top. And it is incredibly real world. So that enables us to actually help athletes get faster relative to whatever power they're able to output. And that's really valuable. And then the third element is self-awareness and pacing into that. And that becomes really important. How do you actually learn pacing? What approach actually works for you best? The third big element that I'll just highlight today on Coach's Corner is a shift in our focus on strength training. So we focus a lot on athlete development, speed return, and coordination. If you've been consistent in strength over the last few months, you've done a lot on joint health, you've done a lot on pure strength. Now what we want to do is convert that potential into speed. And then we also want to have a parallel focus on tissue health because training load is going up, so injury risk is increasing. So therefore, we start to think about injury prevention in strength. But more importantly to that for me is getting a return on the input of strength to actually help you get faster and better resilience so that you can race faster. And so that starts to become a shift in focus. This is the point that we see a lot of athletes dropping off of integrated strength training. So we double down right now. We bring it back in video-based sessions so that athletes can really be successful. So what does this all relate to you? These components of what we're doing at Purple Patch. What are the key takeaways that you can draw for your own journey if you're not coached by Purple Patch? Well, number one, don't just chase fitness. I want you to chase race readiness and skill development. If you think about building your structure, building your training plan, and there's a whole focus on physiology, easy days, longer days, faster days, stronger days, whatever it might be, that's important. But realize that you're going to get the best returns by also developing a strong sense of self-management and pacing, and also yielding skill acquisition, whether it's sighting, whether it's learning your efforts going uphill in running or carrying speed downhill or terrain management on the bike. This is the stuff that is the absolute amplifier on your speed returns, no matter how fit you get. That's where the big yield is. So you want to be thinking about these components. Of course, we can help you, but if you're going alone, that's what I want you to cement your mind. On the strength training, well, if you committed to strength in the off-season, that's great. But please, please, please don't turn away from it now. Don't turn your back, because I believe this is the moment just before and into race season. This is when the benefits begin to emerge, but they're only going to emerge if you stay on it. So it's a good time to have a recommitment to strength, to double down and say the rest of this year, I'm going on the journey. If you do that, you're going to yield the benefits, and even more so, you're going to get to next off season at the end of this year, primed to really take it up another level. Because at the end of the season, you don't go back to square one. You keep building and keep building, unless you stop right now and you forget about it. Then you are right back in the basement. The elevator goes up and improves, but if you turn it off, it goes right back to ground level. Alrighty, guys. So with that, that's a glimpse into our show. We're not going to do anything else around this episode apart from one thing. Remember, the webinar. We have a fantastic webinar coming up May 17th. It's 9 a.m. Pacific. It's open to all listeners. You can come and join us. It's absolutely free. And this is version 2.0 of our most popular webinar that we've ever done. It's around success in an Ironman and a half Ironman, by the way, on a hard and hilly course. There's a lot of personality out there so far as terrain, and we give you all of the insights, no matter how fit you get, how to best distribute your effort across a hard and hilly course to ensure that you're successful across all three disciplines. And so we're going to be talking about some of the insights that I've learned, some of the skills and actions that you can take so that you can manage your pacing, so that you know how to navigate the uphills, how you can get speed return on the downhills, how you can distribute your resources over the course of a race. It's pretty in-depth. It has a thorough Q&A associated with it as well. So that becomes a really important component, because you can dive in deep, get the education from me and my wisdom, but you can also ask me any questions that you have. It's going to take about an hour all in. It's absolutely complimentary. You can attend live, and if you're unable to attend live, and then feel free to sign up anyway, because we will send you the recording, including the thorough Q&A session. And there's nothing like learning from others' questions as well. So I hope that helps. I'll leave that link in the show notes. You can also reach out to us for anything, info@purplepatchfitness.com. But without that, it's one for the triathletes this week. Let's dig into the show. Andy Blow, founder and CEO of Precision Fuel and Hydration. It's a cracker. You'll enjoy. Barry, it's time for the meat and potatoes. All right, it is the meat and potatoes, and goodness me, we've got a positive emergency edition here. Andy Blow, Precision Fuel and Hydration, welcome to the show once again, I should say.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be back again, this time from the other side of the pond. So we found a time that works for us both.
There you go. Yeah, we're well. I'm drinking my my morning tea. You're drinking your afternoon beer. So it sounds like it's perfect across all fronts. We wanted to put this together, and it is literally with throwing this show together over the last 24 hours because of the really exciting news that for over the course of the rest of this year, Precision Fuel and Hydration will be the on-course hydration facilitator for all Ironman and Ironman 70.3 events through Europe, including the Vinfast Ironman World Championships in Nice this coming year. Which is, firstly, congratulations! What a a great addition to all of the races there. You must be excited.
Yeah, we are, Matt. I say this unreservedly in that the office is absolutely buzzing that we've managed to pull this one off, because, like you, I've been involved in the sport of triathlon for several decades now, and through thick and thin, for better or worse, Ironman has been the brand that inspired me wholeheartedly. When I've got VHS tapes of Dave Scott and Mark Allen running down a Leahy Drive together that are virtually worn out because of how much I used to watch them. It was my main aim in triathlon in the late 90s, early 2000s, was to get myself a ticket for Kona, which I managed to do in the end.
Yeah.
And, and that was actually maybe, not especially poetically, but it was 20 years ago that I did Kona in 2004. And to think that if you'd have told me then that 20 years later, we'd be a brand partner of Ironman, I probably wouldn't have believed you. No.
Well, I'm going to ask you how it came about, but I want to give some context first for the listeners, because you guys, I think, are in your 13th year in business. Is that right?
We are, yeah. 2011 was when we started.
2011. So for 13 years. And when I think about yourself as a leader of the organization, but also just the broader precision fuel and hydration company that you are, for the last 13 years, you've been wholly dedicated to not just developing products that are going to help athletes, but also boots on ground, helping athletes individually and collectively through education, where I think you've become, and most people agree this, one of the leading hydration resources as an organization in the world. And I know it's a huge passion of yours, and we've had you on the show. We've talked about it so many times. But I think what the athletes are getting out of this is not just a product off the shelf that's been thrown together and you've thrown some money at a sponsorship, etc. But for me as a coach, this is just a wonderful step for the athletes, and I want to unpack that. So I guess first, just summary: how did all this come about? It's a little bit out of the blue for me. Let's call it this. So, how did you end up in this position?
It's a bit out of the blue for us, to be totally honest with you, Matt. We didn't get out of bed on 1st of January this year and think we're doing a deal with Ironman this year. We've seen the value in, a lot of our customers are Ironman athletes or triathletes in general. Although we spread across a lot of sports, we've kind of got that triathlon DNA from my background, and that's always meant that a high proportion of athletes are doing swim, bike, run. We've regularly turned up at Ironman events, either in an official or an unofficial capacity in the past. So we've often bought expo space at Ironman events and exhibited and had a good response. And we actually went to the Nice World Championships last year because it was on our doorstep and we wanted to be there and support our athletes, and caused a minor kerfuffle, I suppose, in some ways, because although we were doing everything, that we could rightfully do, just by promoting our brand, it definitely ruffled the feathers of Ironman, I think, because we weren't an official sponsor, and we were quite loud and we were very there, shall we say, from a promotional perspective. And I think that we were probably already, if you like, on Ironman's radar already, but that cemented us as an up and coming brand, I suppose, in their eyes. And it was quite flattering to get a call a few weeks ago when, for whatever logistical reasons, Ironman needed some assistance in Europe with finding a partner to provide hydration products, and providing hydration products for several tens or even 100,000 athletes over 40-something races in a short space of time is quite a logistical challenge. And the first thing I did when I sort of got the call was I had to say to Sam and Johnny, who who run our operational and logistical side of the business, and sort of said, well, just hypothetically, guys, if we needed to supply X amount of hydration tablets for Y amount of athletes over Z amount of months, could we do that, effectively? And when they came back and sort of said, well, actually, we think we could, it opened the door to them talking seriously to Ironman, saying, yeah, well, we think we can fulfill the logistical needs for this operation. So, okay, what does it look like for us to do this? And then, to Ironman's credit and to the credit of our team, everyone got their heads together very quickly, did a lot of problem solving, and managed to pull something together in literally a few weeks. That means that, now we're providing the hydration across the season for the rest of 2024.
Well, what we want to do is actually provide some really useful recommendations and advice of here's the landscape of these Ironman and half Ironman races. Here's what's on course. Let's answer some questions around what it means as far as the hydration side, but also some first steps in how people can start to build their action plan to fuel and hydrate their journey really effectively. And so that's the crux of our conversation here. In order to kickstart that, I think we should go through some of the logistical side that I'm sure there are questions. When I first heard it, I thought, what are you going to do? You're going to give everyone a tube of tablets to give out? Are they going to have to pick up a tablet and throw it in their torpedo? So first, what's it going to look like? I know it's based around your orange tablets, so the 1,000 milligrams, but just give the listeners some insight into what this is actually going to look like on course practically. How are you going to deliver it? What are you offering, etc.?
Yeah, so the product that we're supplying, you're right, is the orange coloured, not orange flavoured, it's a citrus flavour, but orange coloured tablet pack that we do, pH 1000, which has 1,000 milligrams of sodium per litre and is a low calorie, like virtually zero carb product, which we can get to in a minute. So it's for hydration purposes because we're the hydration partner. And that product is not going to be available in tablet form because tablet form is not much use to you when you're racing. You need a drink. So it's going to be mixed at the right concentration into barrels, and then that's going to be decanted into bike bottles on the bike. So as a competitor, you'll be handed bike bottles as you normally would from an aid station, bottles that will fit in your bottle cage. And so you can pick up bottles of pH 1000 during the bike ride, as well as water and I believe cola as well. And then you'll also be able to have water, pH 1000 and cola in cups on the run. So all pre-mixed product. So, easy to access basically when you're on the course.
So the easy way to think about it is, to summarize, is on the bike, water bottles that fit on your bike. That's always a question that I get. That is the effective replacement of the prior drink Gatorade, and we'll get to the calories in a second, but that's it. And then on the run, rather than grabbing a sort of the paper cup of Gatorade, it will be the 1,000 milligram solution mixed correctly already that you can just drink on course. Period.
Yeah,
so that's
it. Exactly that.
Okay, and then the calories that we'll get to in a second on the course, those are Morton gels and bars, fruit, salty chips, and all of that side of stuff. And we'll talk about that when we get to the action plan. Okay, super. So then the next thing to unpack, which of course is the deviation that we have here, is this drink, unlike Gatorade, that has actually quite a lot of calories. So in prior years, some people would be relying on Gatorade as a source of hydration, as well as a source of caloric replenishment. This precision hydration is effectively water and electrolytes only, with no or very, very low calories. And so can you go through a little bit of the potential benefit to athletes on that and some of the ramifications?
Yeah, definitely. And that is a big change for a lot of people to get their heads around. And I completely understand that. But when you're racing, as you know, we talk about this all the time, there's 3 levers you need to pull nutritionally: fluid, sodium, and carbohydrates. You can get all of those 3 things from traditional sports drinks like Gatorade that usually have about 5 to 7% carbohydrate and around about 500 milligrams of sodium per litre. They can be good, and they are a really good product normally for short distance events when you want everything in one bottle and you just need primarily carbs, but a little bit of fluid, a little bit of sodium. They work wonders on that. When you get into the longer races, I've always been my preferred route, if you like. The reason we came out with the pH line of low calorie tablets to start with was that separating your hydration intake, your fluid and sodium intake from your calories brings numerous advantages over the long distance. Because for example, on a very, very hot day, you need to drink more than you do on a cold day because you're sweating more. If you're getting most of your calories from your drink and you drink twice as much or 3 times as much as we sometimes see between coldest and the hottest events, you don't need 3 times more calories. So you'll be overloading on calories or underdoing the calories at either extreme. There's only that kind of Goldilocks point in the middle if you're using an all-in-one drink. So by having a low calorie or close to 0 calorie electrolyte replacement drink as the primary drink, that enables you to control those 2 levers together, fluid and sodium, make sure that you can get adequately hydrated, and then you can worry about getting your calorie numbers in separately, usually via bars, gels. Maybe in some people's cases, the more sophisticated athletes might use a bottle of gel or a bottle of very, very strong premixed carbohydrate drink that they've taken on the bike with them from the start. But basically, you're sort of separating those 2 out. And I think that whilst there are other ways to skin a cat when it comes to your race nutrition, we do know athletes who do races entirely on liquid calories and that kind of thing. It's a higher risk strategy, and the safe way is to get fluid and electrolytes right and get your carbs in separately. So I think getting people to get their heads around that and understand what they can get from these different products is really, really important.
It's actually a little bit of a forced change, and change is always difficult for people, but it's a forced change to think about their fueling and hydration a little bit more strategically. And as a coach, you sort of, everyone's going to have their preset, hopefully tested and practiced before in their training, but their preset caloric consumption, and I'm going to come back and sort of re-explain it through my coach's lens, and I'll represent this in grams per hour of carbohydrate, but someone might be taking in 60 grams per hour, 80 grams per hour, 100 grams at the high end, 120 at the extreme end, whatever their appropriate caloric intake is, and that stays constant. And then what you're saying there is, relative to conditions and needs, you can throttle forward and back and respond on day your hydration and your electrolytes as well. So it creates that really open door flexibility sort of thing on that side.
That's exactly it. And then the other question that we've been getting allied to that is, obviously we do pH 500, we do pH 1000, we do pH 1500, because within the hydration vertical, different people often respond better to different amounts of electrolytes. So 1,000 milligrams per litre, which is what's in the on-course drink, is relatively strong. That's about twice the sodium strength of a standard Gatorade. It's a little bit stronger than a Gatorade Endurance, which is about 800, just over 800 milligrams of sodium per litre. And people have been saying to us, well, what if I'm not a salty sweater, or I'm not a big sweater, and I don't need a lot of sodium? And the answer to that would be, water is being given out on course as well. So you basically would take less frequent bottles of pH 1000 and more frequent bottles of water for your hydration. And then on the flip side, the question I would be asking as an athlete is, look, I'm a very heavy salty sweater. I'm losing well over 1,500 milligrams a litre. I need more actually than 1,000 per litre on average to get me through a hot Ironman in good shape. And the answer to that is that things like we do an electrolyte capsule, lots of other brands do as well. And knowing what you've got in your electrolyte capsules and taking additional ones to sort of fortify alongside the pH 1000 is the way to increase your intake. So that flexibility to fine tune your hydration intake still exists. And from the data that we've got, and you'll know this from the sweat testing that you guys done at Purple Patch, the average sweat sodium loss in athletes is between sort of 900 and 1,000 milligrams per litre.
Exactly.
So hence we picked the pH 1000 as like the one on-course drink, because it does hit the middle of the bell curve quite nicely.
Let's take a quick break and let's talk about Purple Patch. Purple Patch Coaching, or the Purple Patch Tri Squad. You know what we do? We help athletes like you get faster. And in the process, we absolutely refuse to compromise on the other key components of your life. In fact, we work with you to try and improve performance, not just in sport, but across life. So how do we do that? Well, first, we deliver a training program that truly integrates into your life. It's so flexible that it works with all the fluctuating life demands. We also support that with incredibly comprehensive education across every aspect of performance, filtering out the complexity and the contradiction to get you into the actions that are simple, effective, and also actionable. Whether it's around race fueling, nutrition, sleep, recovery, integrated strength, racecraft, whatever it might be, we are there to help you with education. And when you compound that with a really smart and accessible training program, you get consistent, you get smarter, and you get faster. And all the while, you have a whole coaching team and a dedicated, like-minded community that is in your corner for support, accountability, and feedback. And so what do you get out of this? What does life look like? You get results, you get time back, you get confidence in your program, and you get control. It's very simple, folks. 3 steps. Number 1, head to the squad page at the website, purplepatchfitness.com. Reach out for a complimentary consultation. We can explain the program more. We can answer your questions. We can also understand your situation to see where you are a best fit within the ecosystem of Purple Patch, and we can get you on program within minutes. And by the way, we back ourselves and we care about your success and enjoyment. And so we have a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. All right, with that, let's get back to Andy and the show. Thanks for listening. The one thing that I think athletes are going to benefit from, and this is almost an impossible question for you to answer because it's going to make it sound like you're sort of selling your own product, but the one thing that's the benefit of having this precision in is the lack of taste fatigue that tends to come with the product. And I think that's because you've done so much extensive testing of all of your products, your gels, your hydration, under both situations of athlete fatigue and also high temperature. Yeah, so the sort of neutral element to it is probably going to help. Versus most people that have done an Ironman or half Ironman get really sick of the sweeter tastes that come with a lot of the other products. So I think it's going to make it a little bit easier to carry on drinking at the load that you need over the course of all those hours. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, very much so. The reason we've never deviated to this point from having a single very mild flavour to all of our drinks, and the taste is basically universal across the drinks, is that we spent an inordinate amount of time and energy tuning that flavour by testing it in a heat chamber, by testing it with athletes in hot conditions, and essentially trying to turn where other people seem to want to turn the volume up on flavour to make it stand out, we tried to turn the volume down to the minimum. It was like, what's the minimum amount of flavour that we can give this? And I can credit you actually with the comment you made once about it just gives your water a little bit of personality. You know, that's what we're aiming for with the flavor. It's not and the personality is very introverted on this one.
Yeah.
You know, this is not an extrovert flavor. And I love strong flavored drinks some of the time, but not when I'm doing, you know, for me, I'd rather have something plain, simple, and, you know, kind of get as much of it in as I can.
I think this is important for athletes, and this goes beyond precision. When you think about what you're consuming on a race course, you're not trying to replicate what you want to eat at dinner or what your favorite dessert is. This is, and I think this helps the mindset, this is functional fuel and functional hydration. So the taste profile that you want is not offensive, that you can carry on drinking and you don't get tired of. And so you actually want something, in this case, to fly under the radar that isn't crazily salty, crazily sweet, whatever it might be. You know, I might love key lime pie or caramel flavor ice cream, but I don't want to have that at hour 10 of an Ironman. And I think that's the premise. But I know we're deviating, of course. Let's get into an action step then. Some of the practical side of stuff. We talked about some of the other stuff on course, and it should be clear this is a hydration deal that you've done. So you won't be delivering precision blocks, precision gels. They won't be at the aid stations. That will be Morton with their bars, gels, etc. So yeah, go ahead.
Go on. Sorry, what I was going to say, Matt, it's probably worth diving in at that point to just give you an overview of what's in those products, because Morton gels and Morton bars will probably, to my mind, they're available globally actually with Ironman. They've got a long-standing global deal, and those products deliver 25 grams of carbohydrate in a standard Morton gel. 25 grams of carbs in a standard Morton caffeine gel, along with 100 milligrams of caffeine. And the Morton solid bars, depending which one you have, it's around about 40 to 42 grams of carbohydrate in a whole bar. And I think those bars come in 2 pieces, so it'd be like 20 or so grams per piece. So it makes the maths, not too onerous to do, in that if you are aiming for something like 75 grams, which would be a typical amount for a lot of athletes to be aiming for per hour, you might do that through 3 gels, or through a couple of gels and 1.5 bars or something like that. And that's what's going to, I would imagine, if you're not carrying some of your own nutrition, which is a topic we should probably also talk about, but if you were relying on picking up fuel on the course and picking up drinks on the course, then you can tune your sodium and fluid intake using the PX1000. And then independent of that, there's not a huge amount of sodium in the Morton gels. There's about 20 milligrams, I think, in a standard Morton gel, but that's a relatively, in the scheme of things, when we're talking about athletes taking several hundred or 1,000 milligrams an hour, that's a relatively small amount. Then really you can focus on saying, right, I'm going to get my carbs from here, and then get my hydration from here.
Mm-hmm. As a coach, by the way, I'd just say, ignore the sodium. That's where you're getting your sodium. Keep it simple. Don't make the math too complicated. So you go from there. Let's go down and let's talk about carrying your own fuel. Just a little bit of a broader topic, but carrying your own stuff as well. So this is on course if you're wholly reliant. And on the bike, this is obviously logistically challenging, but you can draw from the Morton products. You've got the precision hydration. Where's your recommendation on people carrying their own sort of chosen products versus getting stuff off of course?
I would say on the bike on an Ironman, there's a pretty big benefit to carrying most of your own calories if you can. And that's based around the fact that then you can use stuff that is tried and tested in training. And also that level of self-sufficiency means you haven't got to dice with the aid stations, especially if you're in a busy part of the course. If you're a kind of mid-pack athlete, those aid stations get pretty hectic. They're a risk factor for not getting what you need. They're a risk factor for crashing. They're a risk factor for all sorts of things that you don't want to, you don't want to be controlling. Like a lot of the pro athletes that we work with, they will try and be, apart from water, they will try and be entirely self-sufficient on the bike. So they've got all of their calories, all of their electrolytes, and they're just looking at taking fluids, they're just looking at taking additional water on board, because that keeps it really, really low risk and really simple. So, we've got our flow gel, which is like a runnier version of our standard gel, which you can put into a measured bike bottle, and that'll give you 1 pack of that, gives you 300 grams of carbs, which is a good way towards what a lot of people will need on the bike during an Ironman.
So that's three plus hours of fuel in a single water bottle delivery system, basically.
Yeah, it's like a 16-ounce, 500 milliliter bottle that'll hold that. And usually what we see a lot of athletes doing to keep it very simple is one of those, so 300 grams of carbs in the flow gel, and then topping that up with a range of energy chews and caffeine gels if you're someone who wants to add caffeine to the regime. That's a relatively compact way of making sure you've got all your calories with you on the bike. Then you can start with your bottles. Apart from the one bottle that's got your flow gel in, you've got electrolyte drinks, or even, if you're going for a flow gel plus a high carb drink mix, you can start with that and then move on to picking a handful of gels up later on. What I would say is, though, even if you think you're going to be self-sufficient on your race nutrition plan, make sure you fundamentally understand exactly what's in all of the products that are on course, because if shit hits the proverbial, then you need to be able to adjust. We had a great example of that a couple of years ago with Leon Chevalier, who did Ironman Mallorca, went over a speed bump, lost half of his nutrition in a bottle, but quick thinking enough to work out, did the maths in his head, knew exactly how many grams of carbs were in that bottle, knew how much sodium, picked up the Morton and bits and pieces on the course and made up his numbers almost perfectly. But that was only because he knew exactly what he dropped and what he needed to pick up. You do need to be mentally, sort of switched on to those kind of possibilities in order to get it right.
So that makes sense on the biking portion. and we talked about the options there. What about the run? The run is a different thing. You come on, you're not carrying a big backpack for the most part. So, what's your advice coming for the course? We've got the same situation in aid stations. You've got access to precision hydration across the run course. But any recommendations for people as they set up their plan?
Yeah, I'd say one of the recommendations we usually make is, especially if you're someone, if it's a hot race, if it's humid, if you're a big sweater, and you know hydration is going to be a challenge on the run. A, you probably should have set yourself up well with drinking plenty on the bike, but B, don't be afraid to run out of transition carrying a bottle. As long as you dispose of that responsibly at an aid station where they allow you to, then really you'll probably have nailed that in the first 3 or 4 kilometers, the first 2 or 3 miles, and not a problem. It's a benefit because then you can have whatever drink you want, because to your point on taste fatigue, you can have anything in that bottle, and then that will help get you off on the right foot. I would say a lot of athletes are going to want to carry some of the gels or chews or whatever of their choice to begin the run, but it's unlikely you're going to want to carry enough to see you around the entire run. So maybe you're a bit more reliant on aid stations on the run than you are on the bike, which is fine, because we all know it's a lot easier to grab a gel off a table or from a volunteer when you're running at, less than 15 k's an hour rather than biking at 40 k's an hour. And beyond that, we also know that deeper into the age group field, like walking through aid stations, can be a great tactic anyway in terms of prioritizing your nutrition and hydration and giving yourself a disciplined amount to walk rather than just becoming an ad hoc walking shuffle. But what I'd say overall is, again, know what's in the products. Those Morton gels have 25 grams of carbs. That's probably going to be your go-to for additional energy. There is also cola on the run. 100 mils of cola. So I would imagine each cup's going to be, it's really hard to say, but most cups are going to be between 100 and 200 mils of cola, roughly. And the maths is easy, actually, because you get about 10 grams of carb per 100 mil of cola. It's about 10% carbohydrate solution. So I'd be hedging my bets and saying, look, if I down a full cup of cola each time, that's probably going to give me 15 grams of carbs, something like that. So you can kind of do the maths in your head. On the run, for me, because I was a big sweater, I'd always carry salt capsules or electrolyte capsules, and then I'd actually be dumping those in on top of some pH 1000 on the run. Mm-hmm. But if you're less of a salty or big sweater, you could either survive on exclusively pH 1000 or a mixture of pH 1000 and water.
Perfect. I want to come back and just coming back to that sort of 15 milligram, just a reminding so precision gels are 30 grams, just to give people a reference point. Morton gels, you said, are 20 or 25 grams of 25 grams of carbs. So that 15 gram in an average sort of on-course cup of Coke, they're just going to give you that. So a couple of is effectively a gel's worth of carbohydrate as a broad barometer. And then I want to briefly, in a big umbrella term, just while I've got you on advice, caffeine. People always ask about caffeine. Should I take it right before the race? Should I take it during the bike ride? Hold it for the run? Any thoughts on the addition of caffeine? Very broadly, I know it's individual.
Yeah. Well, I would say the first thing is answering the question, is caffeine for me? And often that is a very subjective choice. It's like if you're a habitual caffeine user in day-to-day life and you tend to respond either neutrally or pretty well to it, there's a good chance you're not going to have an adverse reaction during an event. So I would say use it. There's no benefit if you drink coffee every day to suddenly deciding to abstain from coffee on race day. That could actually be quite detrimental because you kind of get used to the stimulant effect. What I would say is that, try and test any caffeine strategy you're going to use in a race in training. But for most people, a lot of people, it's something like, depending what stats you read, 80% of, adults in the Western world start their day with something caffeinated. And, if you're one of those people, then start your race day with something caffeinated. The usual habit that you would use before training and racing is fine. we see a lot of more serious and professional athletes incorporating a caffeine gel about 15 minutes before the start, because that gives you a bit of glucose in the system. And also that caffeine takes between 20 and 60 minutes to really get into the bloodstream, and it takes closer to 60 minutes to peak in the bloodstream. So actually for them, that starts kicking in towards the end of the swim, which is a good time to, get an additional boost. And then from then on, it's really about dripping caffeine in. The performance dose is about 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram per 2.2 pounds of your body weight. So with a little bit of maths, you can work out roughly what that is. But for most people, it's going to be 2 or 3 caffeine gels on the bike, and it might be another 1 or 2 on the run, because as you get towards the end of an Ironman, the caffeine, the half-life of the caffeine means that it's the bit that you took before the swim is kind of already metabolized or being metabolized and out of the system. What I would say is the number one kind of mistake with caffeine is maybe like saving it until, say, the last hour of the run or something like that. A, you can get substantial benefits earlier on by using it, and B, if you take it in the last hour, it's going to be helping you once you've crossed the line as opposed to before you cross the line. So sugar gets into your bloodstream and is effective really quickly, 10, 15 minutes. Caffeine, it's more like 45 to 60 minutes. So just bake that into your head. If people want to really get into the weeds on that, we've got a series of 3 articles that kind of walk you through caffeine use for triathlon and endurance athletes on our website, and that going to our knowledge hub and finding those would be a really good place to start.
It's a good place. And just for folks that are not familiar, so half-life is effectively the time that it leaves the system and transfers through. So this can be accumulative, and give or take with caffeine, it's about 8 hours. And that's why you sort of reference consuming it at the front. For most athletes, by the time you're 8 hours into an Ironman, you've still got some to go, but that first gel is getting rid of it. So I think that point in not saving it till way to the end is really important, because athletes think, caffeine, an hour to go, that's going to get me home. It's like, no, that will just make sure that you don't sleep that night. So, but you're not going to anyway because you're so overstressed. So Andy, thank you very much. I guess my last question is, if folks want to understand more or want to get some further advice from you or your team, where should they best go to understand the products more, but also maybe get the next real practical individual steps on education or formulating their own action plan for fueling and hydration?
Yeah, and genuinely, Matt, this is the bit that we're most excited with, because as you well know, we're geared up to talk to a lot of athletes and help them with their nutrition plans. That is why we exist. So if they go to our website, Precision Hydration or precisionfuelandhydration.com, you can go to either of those. In the top menu bar, there's an Ironman landing page, which talks to you about everything that we talked about, exactly what's on course and that kind of thing. You can book a free video call with the sports science team, which, as we are saying in our blurb about this, is not a hard sell. It genuinely is not. We're not trying to sell you something. We're trying to answer your questions. Most of our team are sports scientists. A lot of them are athletes. A lot of them are triathletes who've done an Ironman or a 70.3. So you're going to talk to someone who understands what you're trying to do and wants to help you. If you're not the kind of video call type, just send us an email. We'll respond to it. Send us a DM on Instagram. We're open for business and we want to talk to you. So reach out. We've got a load of articles on our knowledge hub. Basically come and find us online, reach out in whatever way you feel most comfortable with, and we'll get back to you. Oh, and very importantly, what I haven't mentioned is, specifically if you're racing an Ironman European race, our fuel and hydration planner, which is on the website, has all of the Ironman races now baked into it. So you haven't got to enter all the details. You just select the race that you're doing. It knows what kind of weather conditions are likely to be happening. We can, give you some advice on your hydration and fueling strategy as a basis. So if you are relatively unsure at the moment as to even where you start, I would say start with the fuel and hydration planner. Fuel and hydration planner, and they're all in there. You choose I'm going to Nice or I'm going to Hamburg or whatever it might be, and then you've got all the specifics already inputted in there, which makes it very helpful, very simple. Yeah. So, well, best of luck for the year, and we're excited for this. We wish it was global, but we're glad this is a great first start, and thank you very much for all the work that you and the team do to help athletes ultimately be successful. So really appreciate it, Andy. Awesome. No, thanks, Matt. And thanks for helping us get the message out with this. As I said at the start, we're absolutely buzzing for this one, and it's great to be able to announce it and get it out there.
Good stuff. All right, take care. Guys, thanks so much for joining, and thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed the new format. You can never miss an episode by simply subscribing. Head to the Purple Patch channel of YouTube and you will find it there and you could subscribe. Of course, I'd like to ask you, if you will subscribe, also share it with your friends, and it's really helpful if you leave a nice positive review in the comments. Now, any questions that you have, let me know. Feel free to add a comment and I will try my best to respond and support you on your performance journey. And in fact, as we commence this video podcast experience, if you have any feedback at all, as mentioned earlier in the show, we would love your help in helping us to improve. Simply email us at info@purplepatchfitness.com or leave it in the comments of the show at the Purple Patch page, and we will get you dialed in. We'd love constructive feedback. We are in a growth mindset, as we like to call it. And so feel free to share with your friends. But as I said, let's build this together. Let's make it something special. It's really fun. We're really trying hard to make it a special experience, and we want to welcome you into the Purple Patch community. With that, I hope you have a great week. Stay healthy, have fun, keep smiling, doing whatever you do. Take care.